Hi, it's Steve with Palladino Power Project, and in this video, I have Alexander Neverov to join me because he's what I consider an expert user of real-time environmental adjusted power. And this is a very important topic, very useful for runners because you are always running in most runners are running in variable conditions across an entire year. So right now in the Northern Hemisphere, we're in the middle of summer, and humidity is creating some problems for runners. And in other scenarios, you might have someone's a mountain runner, and they may start at 1,300 meters and go to 2,500 meters in the race. And so real-time environmentally adjusted power is a very big bonus for runners. Don't you agree, Alex?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
let's
my pleasure to join.
Yeah. Well, you have Alex and I have been working together a long time. And,
I think at least 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years. And he's been using real-time environmental adjusted power, using Stryd since about inception. And so I asked him to join us because he's going to give us some important pearls here as we go through. But first, I wanted to just go through some baseline information to help us understand why this is important. First being is that this is pretty common sense. Sustainable power declines with progressively higher temperature, humidity, or altitude. So, and we know this, if we're running the same effort, if we're running the same pace or the same power, it's going to be a higher effort, a harder effort if it's in higher temperatures as opposed to lower temperatures, or higher altitude than lower altitude. So sustainable power declines with progressively higher environmental conditions or less power-friendly conditions. And by virtue of that, CP, FTP, and their associated training targets, because that's where they're derived from, also, it declines with progressively higher temperature, humidity, and altitude. So it's possible that let's say your fitness is staying about the same. Your CP is relatively unchanged, but over a 4-week period, the conditions have changed from some maybe 68 degrees Fahrenheit to now 85 degrees Fahrenheit. The CP doesn't apply anymore. It doesn't apply in those conditions. The other thing to understand is CP, FTP, because of what I just said, it's specific to a narrow range of environmental conditions. So if you tested and it was 18 Celsius, if it's 18 degrees, then that CP is applicable to maybe 15 to 23 degrees or 22 degrees, all right? Once you get out of that range, the CP becomes less and less applicable and needs to be adjusted. Power is relative. It's relative to environmental conditions. Basically, that's what I've been saying over the last several slides. And so the question is, can we correct for environmental changes? Can we correct CP? Can we correct training targets for environmental changes? And the answer is yes. The Stryd folks developed a fabulous environmental correction calculator, so to speak, and shared it with us about 7 years ago. And here's an example where, okay, 320 watt CP, let's say, and this person is going to altitude from 100 meters up to 1,500 meters. And the temperature is a little bit different, right? It's only 93% of sustainable power at FTP is only about 93% under these new conditions, 1,500, 28, and 40. So this person's effective CP in those conditions went from 320 at 100, 25, and 30%, went from 320 to now the runner's up there at 1,500 meters, 28, 40. Effectively, it's only about 299 watts. So that's a big difference, and it's important to account for that. Now, this is a static, so you have to do this before and figure out what it is and apply a sort of a static correction. The superpower calculator is another way to access that same calculator. The Stryd folks allowed Steve Bateman to employ that environmental corrections calculator in the superpower calculator. And this function adjusts power based on altitude, temperature, humidity. That is function, and it's employed in many of the other functions within the superpower calculator. So there are ways of doing this and adjust for environmental conditions statically. But wouldn't it be cool to have it adjust in real time? And the answer is yes, it would be. And that actually was something that Stryd developed, first for Apple Watch back in April of 23, and then for Garmin Watch later that year, November 23. And that's when real-time environmentally adjusted power options were added to these apps. Stryd Zones for Garmin Watch and the Stryd Apple Watch app. If you have Coros, if you have Polar, this is not available, unfortunately. So these are the watches that allow you to have real-time environmentally adjusted power. So when might you employ it? Well, it's sort of a common sense thing, but let me go over some examples. So your CP was established in one set of conditions which were maybe more power friendly, but the conditions have changed to what your current conditions are on. What is it, a heat wave? Or maybe you're going to an altitude training camp. That's a sudden change. Or you're traveling to a different area that has different conditions. Maybe you're in cooler climates up north and you're going south for a winter holiday, but it's warmer. That would be another time to employ it. And then if your CP estimate is older in different conditions, which happens, let's say people tested in early May, and now we're in the heat of summer. That CP is no longer applicable, but we could fix that in real time. Another set of applications would be longer runs or races where the conditions change significantly within that run or the race. So if you're doing a long run and you're starting early in the morning, cooler conditions, but ending in hotter midday conditions, when you're doing some marathon power tempo at the back end of your long run, this would be a good application. Or let's say you're a mountain runner and you're starting at 1,300 meters, you're going to go up to 2,500 meters and back down and back up, etc. This is another great application. So given those applications, let's one other thing. If you're going to use real-time environmentally adjusted power for a race scenario, all right, one of these latter two bullets here. Do not apply environmental corrections in the Stryd race planner. That's double dipping. So just run your race planner based on same conditions, no environmental corrections, but then use real-time environmental adjusted power. Do not apply corrections and then use real-time adjusted power. So that said, we're going to bring Alex back on and let him go through the setup so you can actually use this. Alex?
Yes. So if you're using Garmin watch, you obviously have Stryd Zone installed. So you have also a helper app on your phone. I think it's called IQ Fields or something like that. You go into that app and you can access all settings. There are some settings for Stryd Zone available on the watch, but not all. So you open the IQ app, you click on settings, then you can configure several parameters. So obviously you want to click on enable environmental power. And also you want to do a manual environmental adjustments baseline. So for that, I think, Steve, you need to explain a little bit more here what it is.
Okay. One question, if you're doing this on your phone, your app settings, IQ app settings in the phone, does it automatically sync to the watch?
You have to click save. After you click save, it syncs with the watch and save your settings.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about toggling on that manual environmental adjusted baseline, because if it's not toggled on, it's going to be automatic, all right? And automatic means that it's pulling the average conditions, your baseline conditions, your baseline temperature, humidity, elevation, is pulling that in from your 90-day database in your Stryd database, all right? So it's pulling in the average of the entire 90 days, okay? So that's problematic because it's pulling in all data, not just your test or race data. There's no way of doing that automatically. Mm-hmm. And also, the older data in that 90-day database, if it was done in cooler conditions, it is going to skew that average. It's going to skew it lower, right? So the automatic is a problem using the entire 90-day database. Furthermore, the conditions recorded in the database are from local weather station data, not the Stryd pod, which is really odd to me because the fit file has that data in from the Stryd pod, but they record local weather station data to the database, not the Stryd pod.
And here,
yeah.
Those numbers are really different. So I noticed what pod is showing versus local weather station is often pretty different.
Yeah, and the thing is, we want apples to apples. So we want it taken, I want it, Alex wants it, to be from the pod. Now, you might go, oh, well, is the pod what real compared to the weather station? That doesn't matter. It's relative. Remember, so as long as we're comparing apples to apples, what were the data points for environmental conditions during your last test or race, right? That established your CP, and we want to convert that to and we want that from the pod to what's happening on the pod in your current run. So for that reason, I always will provide Alex, okay, he does a 312 CP test, or he runs a 10K race. And I go, oh, well, Alex, that's a new CP for you. We're going to readjust your CP, but the conditions present I get from his pod. I go, that CP is specific to this temperature, humidity, and altitude or elevation. right? And so that is what he puts in there. So if you have recorded the Stryd pod source temperature, humidity, altitude baseline from your tests and races, use it. And now I use WKO, and Alex and I were talking before this video. What if you don't have WKO? Well, Golden Cheetah, you probably can get it there. There may be some other apps where the pod temperature, humidity, elevation is recorded, or you can go to Google search Fit File Viewer, go there, and if you have a CP test, you just open that file and that data channel from Stryd for temperature and humidity, that's recorded.
Steve, just came to my mind. If everything else fails, I think Garmin Watch or Garmin app on the phone shows the graphs from pod data. It's an additional graphs. You can also take a peek on the graph and pick up the relevant numbers. If anything else is not working, that's one of the way to do it too.
Yeah, and so another thing we were discussing. So if you are looking at the pod data for a race or test, so a race, you're going to take the average temperature, average humidity for the entire race, ideally. If it's a 312 CP test, I usually take the average from the 12-minute test because that value leverages your CP estimate more, and the shorter test is less impacted by temperature, humidity than the longer test. So I look at the average for the 12-minute test, if it's a 312 test, or if it's a race, or a 5K park run, or what have you. I take the average for the whole race. And when I say average, it's the pod temperature, humidity, altitude data. So I give Alex that data, he inputs it, and now we have a manual baseline. So Alex, take it from there. Where do we go from there?
So there is a multiple ways how you can set up the display of environmental adjusting power. So what I prefer personally is to have main metric, your main power metric, to be environmentally adjusted. But I also like to see in one of the additional fields amount of environmental adjustment. Again, there is a multiple way how you want to set it up according to your taste. You can do that. What also is important here, there is a quick way to enable and disable it right on the watches. If you don't have phone review, you can go in IQ field settings and toggle enable environmental adjustment right on the watch before you start your activity.
Right. So again, it sounds like set up how you want it to be displayed on the settings in the app, and Alex, has used this a long time, so I respect his choices for how he wants it to be displayed. We'll show you that in just a second. But once you are ready to go, you're going to enable that. And Alex, when do you enable it?
So if I'm running outside and I know conditions may not be super power friendly, so that's definitely one of the cases what I want to do it. But if I'm running indoors, I don't want environmental correction because, again, Steve provided me already adjustments to my parameters based on typical conditions and absence of air power what I have inside. So that scenario, if I'm running indoors, I definitely do not want to mess with environmental power, so I toggle it off.
Yeah, what I do for Alex, I do pretty much for all the athletes that I coach that use a treadmill, is I provide them with a weight setting specific for treadmill use that incorporates the lack of air power and environmental differences on the treadmill versus when the test was done outside, the CP testing or the race that established CP when it was done outside. So I incorporate air power loss and environmental corrections into a weight setting. And since the conditions in the treadmill room are pretty static, it works pretty good. And the feel is pretty much the same on the treadmill as it is outside.
Another scenario when I don't use it is races typically. Again, I may use it in marathon, but in shorter races, Steve usually checks weather forecast and he provides me already tailored targets for race plan, taking into account conditions what will have happened during the race.
Right. So if someone's using a Stryd race planner, they would apply environmental corrections, and then they would not enable this. All right. And that's what Alex does. Now, Alex doesn't do mountain racing where he's up and down, but if you're doing mountain racing, or let's say you are running a ultra that has a wide range of environmental conditions, then it might be good to enable this for races. But Alex's races, Alex races between 5K and marathon, and we adjust the power targets based prior to the race, and give him adjusted power targets so he doesn't need to toggle this on.
Yeah, but speaking of that, you remember, Steve, I had a couple of races when temperature went up to almost 80 degrees from 60 during marathon. So that probably would be a good way to do it.
I think that's not, if you're running in a marathon that might happen, then I think this is the way to go, actually. Yeah. Really, I do.
And also, obviously, your favorite long runs, when you, as you said already before, your higher intensity activities toward the end of the run, I definitely appreciate when watch adjust that, when I have 15 minutes of marathon power 3 times or something like that at the end of the 23-mile run or something like that. It's definitely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm gonna just one thought on marathon, starting cool, ending in hot. Like a 20-degree Fahrenheit swing. If you toggle this on, there is the possibility that you are running much harder. You may be over. The pendulum swing may be too hard too soon. And marathon is more than just the environmental conditions. It's also fuel utilization, glycogen stores, etc. So I think it's applicable, but you got to be careful and have some common sense. If it's saying, go much higher than what you're used to, then don't. I would stay conservative early on. So. All right, let's go to the next watch screen, what it looks like. And Alex, why don't you take it back?
Yeah, so on the left is when you enable environmental adjustments. So you see we have that pictogram, what Steve circled, that shows that it is actually on. And as I said, I also set up an additional metric at the lower part of the screen, which shows raw wattage adjustment. And maybe Steve, we can explain what it actually means. So in this particular case, for this example, watch shows 86 as environmental adjusted power, meaning what in real life, I run 88 in this particular situation. So watch adjusted by 2 watts. So if it goes negative, meaning that your conditions, what you're running in, were better than your previous conditions, and it's easier for you to run. So that's why it is actually reducing it. If you're running in a more harder conditions, it's going to be positive. So it's actually, let's say it shows 86 and you have +2. You're actually running at 84, but what shows you 86?
Right. So that's important. This what you're seeing there on your left of this screen is a scenario where the current conditions are actually more favorable than the baseline conditions. So, for example, let's say the baseline conditions were 20 Celsius, and right now you're in 19 or 18 Celsius. That's more favorable. So it's going to ask you, with the lower number, it's going to say, hey, we're backing you off, right? Where the opposite would be true. Let's say you're running in heat. Let's say your baseline, your CP is based on 18 Celsius, but you're now running in, say, 26. Then it's going to be a positive number there. It's saying, hey, the number up there is we're actually boosting the displayed number 86. We're boosting it. Let's say it was a plus 4. And it's 86. We boosted it from 84 to account for those environmental conditions. So now the display is allowing you to hit your target range at lower effort, or at the appropriate effort. It's boosting your power for that set of conditions. It's a little bit hard to wrap your mind around, but it works. It actually does correct in real time and adjust your power.
So one thing you mentioned here, Steve, we have targets coming from prescription when you enter your race plan. I mean, effort planner or training run planner. It doesn't change anything in there. Whatever you enter into your structured workout, it will be shown as is. It only adjusts here, in this case, the main metric for me.
Yes. So your targets stay the same, but it's adjusting the displayed power so that you can stay within those targets. All right. And so it's important to know that what's displayed is the environmental adjusted power, but what's recorded to the fit file is the actual power. So in this case, this is in more favorable conditions than the baseline. So he was actually at 88 watts when the display is 86. So the file is recording 88 while it's displayed 86. This is important to know that the real power, the actual power, is recorded in the fit file, not the adjusted power, because it will result in running stress score being in slight error. So if, for example, you're running in less powerful, let's say you're running conditions where you're running 2% lower power, right, to achieve that environmental adjusted power. You're running 2% lower. Your running stress score is likely to be about 2% lower than what you actually did, right? So there may be some error in running stress score, and we can't really correct that, at least in the Stryd ecosystem. That's not corrected, just so you're aware. Alex was talking about, it says he'd rather, this is watts, right? So this is how many watts is being adjusted. Alex was suggesting that this should be percentage, and my response is, yeah, I agree, but it may be a watch display limitation where decimal points can't be used down here. So you may have a 0.5% adjustment, right? But it can't show here because you can't do a decimal point. I don't know, but that's my guess. So yeah, it would be really nice to display the percentage of adjustment rather than actual watts, I think. And Alex thinks the same, but it may be a watch display issue here. So there's a couple of things, but the bottom line, despite RSS maybe being off a little bit, because generally Alex, I'm usually adjusting his CP and environmental conditions as we go into, say, hotter conditions periodically. So the real-time adjustment is generally not more than about 2%, usually less than 2%. So it's not big. So the RSS error is not big and probably not a big issue in training load. It's only when the percentage get really high. In any case, those are a couple of the weaknesses. One is the automatic baseline. We prefer not to use that because of apples to oranges and other reasons. And number two, the potential for a slight RSS error. Aside from that, it is effective. It's very helpful. And what do you say about that, Alex? I mean, am I hitting on that one?
It's pretty user friendly to set up. I think it works all right.
Yeah. So I think that it's something that we both would recommend for those indications that we talked about, and it takes, for the average user, it takes a lot of the figuring out that I do for athletes. It takes that out of the equation and does it automatically for them, or does it in real time for them. So, do you have anything to add, Alex?
Again, I think general advice, right? Test frequently enough, record your conditions, and that will mitigate all negatives what is coming with this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It doesn't, using this does not eliminate the need to do CP testing periodically with a fair degree of frequency, so that you can keep not only your CP current, but also the conditions in which your CP is established current. And it doesn't eliminate that necessity, which is present whether you're using this or not. But if you're doing those things, this real-time environmental adjusted power is very helpful. Alex, any other comments?
No, Steve, I don't think I have anything to add.
Cool. So I really appreciate you joining on this one. I appreciate your expertise and your input. And I want to thank the viewers for watching. If you have questions, go to the Palladino Power Project Facebook group and post questions on this particular video. The other thing is that I have a playlist, a video playlist with other videos on the subject of environmental power corrections. And I will add this video to that playlist, and I will put the playlist the link to the playlist in the description of this video. So thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.